You're about to hear a rebroadcast of Where We Live, which was originally recorded July 8th, 2019.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Human rights organizations routinely call out the Egyptian government for abusing citizens who criticize the country's leadership. In recent weeks, more than 100 detainees at a prison south of Cairo have been on a hunger strike, according to Al Jazeera. They're political detainees jailed by the regime of Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Egypt's president. My next guest has experienced authoritarianism firsthand when he joined other Egyptians more than a decade ago to call for democratic change in the Middle Eastern country. His actions would ultimately cause him to flee Egypt. Esam Boraey is now a Connecticut resident. He joins me now in studio to talk about his experiences. Esam, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So tell me about Egypt, where you were born exactly, and a little bit about your upbringing.
Well, I was born in Cairo. My family originally from Cairo suburb, 20 minutes or 20 miles north Cairo. And for education purposes and job purposes, we moved from our home village to the city. It was very, very beautiful time. Cairo is a very romantic city. By nature. You have neighborhood like you have the Islamic Cairo, you have the ancient Cairo, you have downtown Cairo, which grasps the amazingness of the European Paris and London in the 1800s. So it's a very beautiful place. In that time, I grew up writing poetry and novels, right, for love and romance and stuff like that.
And your parents supported your passion for the arts, for writing?
So well. They really did a very good job in supporting this because, and this is something I really didn't realize that time, they were so happy that I'm out of politics, that I'm not involved in politics. Politics was a forbidden topic. We're not allowed to talk about it. So they find their kid who's so involved in so many beautiful things that will keep him safe. So they were so happy for that.
You mentioned politics was forbidden. They wanted you to remain safe. So let's talk about politically what was going on in Egypt during your upbringing and who was the leader at that time, a dictator.
Well, in that time, the country was ran by a dictator, Hosni Mubarak, who ran the country for decades. And he changed the country from a civilian state to a police state, that the police, the national security branch of the police, was controlling every aspect of the life. And also, in that time, Mubarak was getting old. Growing up, he was 75 years old. And he was preparing his son to take over after him. So he ignored the big files in Egypt, like economy, like health, education. He ignored all of those files, and he just prepared the country military to accept his son to come after him. And that was the situation when I started reading after graduating college, and I started noticing, no, life actually is not the romantic poem that I write on my papers every day. There is another ugly reality that I need to be aware of.
So there's definitely an atmosphere of fear to not be caught speaking badly of the leaders at the time. But what did you, again, recognize when, as you mentioned, you went to school and you saw a different reality, and then when you graduated, what was life like for Egyptians? What was the economy like? How did people make a living? Did they have enough food on their table?
I would say we did have enough food in our tables. Again, and in that time, I was a middle-class kid who grew in a bubble. But after this, I realized there's some people who really didn't have enough food on the table. Our economy was going downhill. We were almost very close to bankruptcy. In Egypt, we didn't have any health system whatsoever in Egypt. The numbers of kids in our classrooms increasing significantly. In some points, you will have 100 kids in one classroom. Mubarak in that time switched all of the fund from education, health to police equipment and military equipment to make sure everyone is following the rules. There was no freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of gathering, freedom of organizing. That was the atmosphere I grew up in.
Before you graduated college, did you know of people who were either arrested or mistreated by the government?
Yes. And I was always wondering, why would anyone put himself or herself in that situation? We have a civilian opposition, as we call it in Egypt. And there was that much active, but the main crackdown was against the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt in that time. There was the most organized, well-connected group in Egypt, and they were fairly active in that time. And I had a neighbor and my uncle who was, both of them were still members of the Muslim Brotherhood, and they suffered the same suffer that everyone else had suffered in that time. And I was always wondering, why my uncle would do all of this to get arrested and be in the way of his kids and family and loved ones, and will put all of his families through these things. I always wondered, and I really didn't have enough knowledge in that time to understand the reality of the situation. And that was my judgment in that time.
So when did the split happen for you?
The split happened after I started teaching and reading more, interacting. Actually, the very first situation was really a funny one. When I got my very first salary in my life, I was 21 years old. And that day, my mom came and she came to my room, and I was getting ready to go hang out with my friends, celebrate my first salary. And my mom was like, "Congratulations, now you're a man, you have a job, you have a salary. And yesterday I was visiting your uncle, and he has a beautiful daughter. She'll be a perfect wife for you." So I was, no, that's too early. I'm still looking for my grad school. So I went to my friends that night playing video games. And I was like, guess what, guys? Today I had my first salary, and my mom gave me a wife. And that's what I expected from them. I expected them to laugh. But their reaction was different. Their reaction was like, "Are you crazy?" They told me, "You really need to wake up and get out of this bubble you live in, and go read and understand what's really going on in the country." And that was a shocking moment. And those are my childhood friends. Those people who will never lie to me. And those are the people I expect they will laugh on the joke. So I start reading. I trust them, and I start going out of my bubble. I start reaching out to more people. I start reaching to different parties in the country and read international reports about Egypt and open my mind more and more and get to realize the situation.
So remind me what year this was.
That was 2007.
2007.
Yep.
So when did you go from passively just becoming more educated by reading what was really going on in your country and how citizens were being treated, to then being an active participant in protesting for change?
A few months after my conversation with my friends, I started reaching out. It was a beautiful movement in that time called Kifaya. Kifaya in Egyptian is enough. So Kifaya movement in that time was a mix of group of labor unions, university professors, teachers, community leaders, political leaders, and stuff like that. They came together to build a grassroots movement in Egypt against Mubarak, and they were targeting the passing power from Mubarak the father to Mubarak the son, and that was their main goal. I started, in that time, my understanding was this is a great goal, but that will not end the problem, because the problem we have actually is the regime itself, not who leads the regime, not who leads the system. The problem is the system. That was the problem. So a few months after that, I had my very first protest. That was my first time, and we were only 7 people. That was 2007. 7 young people. The oldest was 21. The youngest was 19 in that time, and we came together because we refused to fight against one issue, which is passing power from a generation to another. We came here protesting in front of the Egyptian Supreme Court, Cairo downtown, to ask Mubarak to step down. And that was something unheard of in Egypt.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. Today we're hearing from Connecticut resident Esam Boraey. He grew up in Egypt under a dictatorship. He's sharing with us how he got involved in protests calling for democracy in his country, but his decision would change his life forever. How dangerous was that for you to do?
It was very dangerous to the level that the night before, the 7 of us came together for the last time to make sure we understand what we're going through. Like, we were preparing ourselves for everything. We said that might end in zero effect at all. Our protest. Also, that might end in a very dangerous way. We were prepared for that, and we were at the first 5 to 10 minutes of our protest went peacefully. No one, and I mean it, like no one even looked at us in the street. Those 7 young kids standing yelling down Mubarak and Yasqut Hosni Mubarak, and we, like, all of those things. The reality is no one paid any attention to us, but the police did, and they started chasing us. I was arrested in that time.
You were arrested?
Yes, that night, yes. I was arrested, and it's, when you get arrested in Egypt, it's not fun.
So tell us what happened to you.
So when you get arrested in a places like United States, you still have level of protection and rights that will be protected by everyone. But in countries like Egypt or other dictatorship, you have zero rights. So what happened with me, actually, the second I was arrested, I was tortured right away. Like the police officer who caught me just like bunching me by his hands, beating me by his foot, yelling at me like as many bad words as you can imagine, son of a blah blah, and like took me to a car that looks exactly like a metal box, like a tuna box exactly, and you get there and you stay there. In the summer of Cairo, you are in a metal box for few hours. Like, you will feel how chicken feels in a microwave. It's so hot, and they keep you inside just to humiliate you. And the whole idea of that is just to break you down, to break your will, and deliver a message that the president is a red line you can't cross. If you will ever challenge this, if you are a 19 years old kid, if you are a political leader, if you're whatever, if you will cross that line, you're in trouble. And that was the message, but it didn't work with us, apparently.
How long were you held before you were released?
Before the revolution, I got arrested a few times, and every time we varied from sometimes a few weeks to a few hours, a few days. It depends on the situation in that time.
So you were arrested several times, and you started, was part of a small group. How did the level of protest change between 2007 up until the revolution in January of 2011?
So in that time, we really worked so hard as a grassroots movement, and the big break was a year and a half after that day. In April 6, 2008, that was a huge day in Egyptian history, and it was a huge strike in North Cairo, in the labor capital of Egypt, like a coalition from the young people, the youth in Egypt, and the labor unions in Egypt, in the labor capital of Egypt, Al-Mahalla Kubra. And that, for the first time, you had hundreds of thousands of people protesting against the president himself. And the significance of this protest, beside the huge numbers of people, was that for the first time, Egyptians actually took down the portrait of the president in the entrance of the city. In dictatorships, the president will have his picture in every single corner in the country, and to take this down, this is the symbol of taking the president himself down. After that, people started being more aware of the youth movement, and a lot of youth movements start growing after that day, and people started like having more interesting of joining and doing something and attend a protest. We ended up from having 7 people in one protest to maybe have 20 or maybe 50 people in one protest, and that was significant.
That was my next question. I was wondering who the demonstrators were. So primarily they were young people, both men and women?
Yes. Our movement was equally men and women all the way. My very first protest, I had 2 women. 2 of my female friends was with me in my first protest since day one, and we were always empowered by them from that day till the day I was in the cage. Weeks before I leave Egypt.
Going back to 2008 when this huge demonstration happened, very symbolic when you mentioned the picture of Hosni Mubarak being torn down. How did the government respond then?
Oh my goodness. So the government responded very heavily in that time. The protests were seized by militant troops in Egypt, and they started beating. They used tear gases, water, tanks to divide the people, and they seized the town. They locked the city for days and days and days to make sure that it's quiet. A lot of people were arrested. A lot of people were in jail. So the crackdown in the movement was very heavily. And we also experienced the entrance of the intelligence in that time. So in that time, an office related to the police was leading and controlling everything. Now Mubarak actually put all of his weight on the battle by entering the military intelligence and the CIA branch of the Egyptian military to control those kids, as he liked to call us all the time.
Can I ask, during this time, what did your family know what was going on, and what was the reaction? Because earlier you told me they were preparing you for a traditional life.
For the most part, my family didn't know anything. For the most part, but when I get arrested, they will know, and they always wanted to keep it secret. We don't want to make the repetition. We don't want to have the repetition that our kid is involved in because it's still shame to be in jail. I was not ashamed of that at all. My family were not that much supportive of my activism, and this is why I kept it secret for the most part. But they always were begging me to stop, especially every time I get fired from a job. I was fired of almost every single job I had in Egypt, and people intentionally refused to hire me because of my file. So they knew about all of this, and they were not supportive at all. They always begged me to stop whatever I'm doing.
Was it painful for you to have to hide that from your family until the next time you were arrested?
It was very painful because when you work for an underground movement, a grassroots movement, the people you can share with and you can trust are really narrowed. Like, you cannot share everything with everyone for their own safety, for your own safety, for so many reasons. You really have very, very limited people to share with. And sometimes you always, in your weak time, your weak moments, you're always looking for a support system, and my family was that support system, and I could not use them on those situations, so it was very painful.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Today we're hearing from Connecticut resident Esam Boraey. Before the Arab Spring, he joined other young Egyptians protesting for political change. His decision was not the path his parents wanted him to take. Coming up, we learn what happened to Esam after the revolution in Egypt, January 25th, 2011. And later, why his activism would force him to leave his family and his country. You can join us. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of Where We Live. It was recorded on July 8th of 2019.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. More than 8 years ago, on January 25th, tens of thousands of Egyptians gathered in Tahrir Square, demanding an end to President Hosni Mubarak's longtime dictatorship and an improvement to the economic distress plaguing the country. Esam Boraey was one of those protesters. He now lives in Connecticut, but today he's in studio to talk about the revolution and why he gave up so much to see change in Egypt. I asked him where he was when the massive protests began.
And that time I was in Cairo, downtown. I remember very well the night before January 25th, I was with a friend of mine in Tahrir Square. And we witnessed the preparation of the security forces there, the police and the militant troops, how they start like occupying the Tahrir Square and seizing everything and blocking all of the entrance and the exits and everything. So in that time I was in Cairo with my friends preparing and just discussing what would we do in that time, and also the whole preparation of writing down some steps for if I will die, if you would find my body, call this number, and this is the name of the person, and this is the message you should deliver, and this is my address, and this is my family, all of those messages. And you always keep on your cell phone a draft message on my cell phone ready to be sent, and all of the numbers, if you get arrested or anything, just one word or two words like help, just to hit send in 1 second. So all of those preparation emotionally and mentally before I go to participate in that day, I did all of the rituals of according to the Muslim beliefs, that when you did and you move from this world to the next one, and all of those rituals, like basically saying goodbye to this life because you're not sure if you'll come back or not, and you have all of those steps.
Can I ask what your message was to your family if something had happened to you?
I remember I was writing, sorry, I know you asked me to stop this, but now we cannot do anything but forgive each other and say I love you.
When you saw the number of people that gathered to protest again, they wanted to see Hosni Mubarak step down. Were you amazed at the turnout?
I was amazed to tears in that day. How in 5 years, we started from 7 young people to now millions in each street, every town, and every city in Egypt, people who are chanting the same exact words that we started 5 years ago. When we were protesting in front of the Supreme Court, just 7 young people, no one cared about us. Now you have those millions of people around your dream. It was a moment full of pride, tears, surprise.
At the same time, were you fearful of the instability that would come and what would happen to your country? Or were you feeling optimistic that this was now the moment for free elections?
I was optimistic. When you see all of those numbers of people around the love of their country, you have to be optimistic. But we didn't have an answer to the question of what comes next. And that was our main mistake.
So what happened in the days and weeks after, again, Hosni Mubarak stepped down? What was your sense when you saw the different political parties stepping forward and, again, this idea that maybe there could be free elections? So what happened? Was there still unrest on the streets?
There was no arrest in the street in that time, and we were so aware of the fact that revolution is not ruling, and was the old regime still in power, because after Mubarak was gone, the military took over after that, and they promised they will have an early election in Egypt within 6 months, and 2 years passed by and we didn't have election for 2 years. So we couldn't have break in that time. So in that time I was working as part of my job to promote democracy and advocate for the election. But also in the same time, as part of my activism, I was working with other group and political parties and other activists and other stakeholders in the country to push for election. And that was our main goal. We needed the revolution to come to power. People who believe in the revolution, believe in the principles that we went out for. And the military was not the one to trust to be able to achieve those goals. And that was our main work in that time. And we did a great job. That for the first time in the country, we had the most free election with the highest percentage of turnout in our history.
Which was?
I think it was above 50% turnout, which in Egypt is unheard of. And that was how much people trusted in the political process. I do remember people standing for 6 hours straight in line waiting in front of the polling stations to vote, to cast their votes under the rain. I remember that day it was raining so hard. I was like, it barely rains in Egypt. Why today? But people never gave up. I have people for 6 hours. I was monitoring the election in that day all over the country, and for 6 hours we had people waiting online to cast their votes under the rain.
Why was there that level of trust, considering the past history of elections and this idea that whether the military or someone would be interfering in that process?
Because people believed it was ours for the first time. Before the revolution, Mubarak used to own the election, putting all of his police in every polling station, and no one whatsoever will be able to freely cast his or her vote. And always we have a lot of things that after the election day, you will see the ballots on the river, you will see the ballots on trash cans. So people before the revolution had the feeling that my vote doesn't count, my vote doesn't matter. But after the revolution, they believed it's ours. We actually gave our blood, our neighbors, our friends, our loved ones to this. So it's our blood and it's ours now. People made sure the ballots will arrive on time. Polling stations are secured. I will be there and make sure I cast my secret ballots. It was a full people-owned process that people really trusted in themselves and in the process for the first time. And this is why you had this huge turnout.
So what was your reaction? How did you respond when Mohammed Morsi, who was backed by the Muslim Brotherhood, became the president?
I was very neutral. My feeling to Mohammed Morsi, I was against his opponent. I did vote for another candidate who I believed was the most representative of the revolution, was young, was progressive, was well-hearted, didn't belong to the previous regime whatsoever. When it came to only the last two candidates, the last two finals, Shafi and Morsi, I did not support Shafi. I was so opposing to Shafi, but I did not trust Morsi as well. And that was because the history of the Muslim Brotherhood from the day of the revolution until the 2 years that the day that Morsi was elected, they have betrayed our trust for many occasions, and this is why we couldn't trust them anymore.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. Today we're hearing from Connecticut resident Esam Boraey about life before and after the Egyptian Revolution in 2011. He was one of the young Egyptians who protested for free elections. So at the time, and you were working for this pro-democracy group, International Republican Institute, is that correct?
I joined that group after the revolution. So after Mubarak was arrested, then I joined the IRI. It was part of the USAID projects in Egypt to promote democracy. And I was working on a project to help youth, Egyptian youth, and actually Middle Eastern youth, to be more engaged in politics, how to understand politics, how to be a candidate, how to run a campaign, how to gain support. And that is a project I started working on after the revolution.
So your activism continued, and that led you to being arrested even after the revolution.
That's true. So working for human rights in Egypt, it's a crime. Before the revolution, after the revolution, it does not matter. It's still a crime. In that time, after the revolution, I was so motivated to change my country and go take things my way, and I was preparing to run for the Egyptian Senate in that time. Also in that time, the military wanted to push back against the revolution and the revolution powers in Egypt, the youth movement, the youth leaders. They wanted really to end up this movement and push the election back as long as they could. So the first crackdown against the revolution powers was the human rights organizations in Egypt. That was the first step from the military against the revolutions. So working for human rights organization, I was arrested again because of that. one day I was in my office and they attacked my office and took everything. They even took my trash can. They literally took it. They took my laptops, everything. They took everything away. And among other friends, I was sent to the criminal court in Egypt.
So how were you treated while you were detained, and what happened once you had to go to trial?
So just to give you, to set the scene, I was in the cage in the courtroom. Outside of the cage were the 3 judges in the criminal court to judge us, then the 2 prosecutors, and was the government lawyers, which they were joined by 20 or 25 other lawyers against us. Because we were spy, CIA agent, I betrayed my country, the whole revolution was American trap, and all of those things. And outside of the courtroom was a lot of government supporters yelling death to me. It was a very scary moment, and my mom couldn't go to the court with me, so they were watching on TV. And a lot of lawyers and attorneys against us was like asking death penalties because our crime on paper was working for a human rights organization. But all the media in Egypt, state-controlled media, was talking about our crime as being spies and agents for the CIA. So when my mom, someone who never been in court before, never studied law, never even went to college in her life, will see like those 25 very fancy lawyers will asking for death penalty for her youngest baby. It's very scary. One of my friends went to one of those lawyers and I told him, could you please not pronounce the word death penalty? Just mention the number of the article in the law. Like say, like I would like him to be punished according to the Article 25 of the criminal law. We all know this is the death penalty, but his mom home will not be that much afraid about her son. And his response was, didn't he think of his mom when he betrayed his country? Like, we did not betray our country. Read the papers. The official paper says our crime was working for a human rights organization.
Yeah. So how did you get out of that, Esam?
So the trial lasted for 18 months. And I was released after that, and we know we will be found guilty. I refused to I refused any other scenario but staying in Egypt and fight till the last moment to prove myself innocent, clear my name. But after the trial was waiting for the verdict, things seemed not promising. So my friends came and they advised me I need to leave the country. So the message was, if you will go back to prison, no one know when you will be able to leave. The ill treatment in prison will literally kill you. You will be, at the best case scenario, you will be paralyzed in prison. And we have a lot of cases like this, people who lost their sights, people who were left prison paralyzed, or people even died in prison in Egypt. So I decided to have the conversation with my family. So I went to my parents and I had the most painful conversation anyone would ever have was his parents. So I was talking to my parents and I told them, this is the situation and I don't know what to do. And pretty much you need to say it quickly because you don't have enough time. The judge will send the verdict to the airport and I will be locked from leaving the country, or will add me to whatever list, wanted list or whatever. So I need to move quickly. And my dad was like, leave. At least you'll be safe and free. So I told, okay, I will leave, but I don't know when I will be able to come back, and also I might not be able to come back ever. I didn't have enough time to say goodbyes for my family, but I could clearly see in my mom's eyes all of those questions. Like, remember when I asked you to take a different path and get married, have kids, and be happy and safe and stay with us forever, but you chose the other direction, and now we're talking about it, we're choosing between prison or exile. It was a very painful moment, and the main pain of that is you didn't even have time to say goodbye properly, or to express how much you love them, or to even state your case why you did this for a bigger reason beyond your own safety or beyond your own life. That was very, very painful, and took the first plane leaving the country, and came here.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. My guest today is Esam Boraey, a Connecticut resident who was one of the many young Egyptians who protested for change in their country. After the break, we'll hear about why he fled Egypt and how he restarted his life in the U.S. You can join the conversation. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of Where We Live. It was recorded on July 8th of 2019.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Esam Boraey protested for change in Egypt. His actions were dangerous under a dictatorship, and he was arrested multiple times. When Egyptian authorities put him on trial, accusing him of being a U.S. spy, he knew he had to flee the country to avoid a life in prison, or worse, death. I asked Esam what was going through his mind after he was forced to leave his family and the life that he'd known.
So before I came to D.C., the first leaving was to Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, I had 6 hours waiting. So that was the first time I've had enough time to reflect on what's going on in my life. And I remembered all of the childhood memories, all of organizing times, and my friend who was killed in front of my eyes and during the revolution in my arms. But I asked myself a basic question: what are you going to do? Are you going to stay here, keep crying and vanish and just losing everything? I lost my name, my dignity, my innocence, my country, my everything, my money. I lost everything, and now I have nothing. Should I keep going or stay crying? And I decided to choose to go as the second option and keep moving, but I didn't have enough money, and I didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any other language but Arabic, which is my native language. And I even couldn't ask someone in the airport what to do or where to go because I didn't have any English on me. And that was the biggest challenge. And I didn't have enough money, but the concern was how to communicate with people and how to go to immigration and apply to immigration.
Was your goal then to come to the U.S. and apply for asylum? Was that the route that you could take, given the persecution that you experienced in Egypt?
Not really. When I came, I was so hoping that things will end very soon, and I will be able to go back to country and run for an office again and be a president in Egypt. And that was the full plan. And I spent, that was not. But a few weeks after I arrived to the United States, the coup happened in Egypt. And now the man in power who was the man actually who moved the trial against me in the first place.
So this is El-Sisi?
Yes, President Sisi now. In that time, back in 2012, when my trial started, he was the head of the military intelligence. And according to the trial papers, the main report against us was coming from his office, signed by his name. So now the guy who accused me of all of those things, he's in charge now. So things are not moving back. And this is when I decided to just I'm staying here. So that was the moment.
So you left your country in late spring of 2013. There's actually a tweet from now late Senator John McCain. There's a picture of you standing with him in Senator McCain's office. The tweet saying, "Great visit with IRI Global, hashtag NGO workers wrongly prosecuted by the government of Egypt." And there you are. So behind the scenes, was Senator McCain's office working to help you and others that were being wrongly prosecuted?
Yes. Yes, Senator McCain was one of the main people in the Capitol Hill in D.C. who were fully aware of the actual situation in Egypt and really supported human rights and supported our trial, supported us. And that was a very beautiful moment of him to be the first one and to reach out to us and invite us and talk about these things. And we've worked, he came, I met him in Egypt right after the revolution. I met him in Egypt and he showed a lot of support and he always fought for our situation. And it was a beautiful touch of him to show his support in his office.
Eventually, would you apply for asylum?
I did apply for asylum in 2013 after the coup against Morsi. I did apply for asylum, and now I'm a green card holder.
What's it like for you now to be living here now for several years? I'm under the impression that you have not been able to go back to Egypt?
No. Yeah, I still have a lot of concerns to go back to Egypt. Even officially, I was acquitted a few months ago, but the atmosphere in Egypt is still not promising, still very scary and not safe for me to go back to Egypt. So I've been here since then. I consider here now home, and this is the only where I can go, the only where I can live and enjoy my freedom.
Oh, after you left Egypt, when was the first time you were able to communicate with your family?
It was really right away. Like thanks to the internet. Thanks to the internet again, we're able to communicate on daily basis and almost right away. They had to reach out to me because my dad, after I left and after all of the newspaper in Egypt blasted my name as a criminal, as a CIA, all of those bad things that were not true. My dad really couldn't handle these things and he got very sick and he died right after that. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. So that was one of the very first calls I had and being struggling with an immigrant life here in the United States and then get this bad news from Egypt and can't go back to attend your father's funeral or be there for the family. And I didn't have a chance to do that. So that was very tough moment also on me. That was one of the very tough moments for me in the United States.
Talk about your transition, Esam. So you ended up applying for asylum, but you still had to learn English. You still had to find a job. You still had to find a place to live. How did you do it? Who did you know?
I started reaching to a lot of great people in DC, amazing friends who helped me to go to school in DC, language school. I had the chance to study English for 3 months. And then I had to learn on my own. I started reaching out to some people I've met in different occasions and asking them for help. I found a lawyer who was familiar, immigration lawyer who was familiar with the case in Egypt, who helped me to submit my application for the immigration, and then I got my work authorization.
What was your first job?
My very first job, I did work for the United States Institute of Peace, and this is a think tank created and funded by the U.S. Congress to advise the American decision makers on how to solve the world problems in a peaceful way.
I understand it was not a direct path from D.C. to Connecticut. You ended up in Iowa, of all places. Can you tell us how you ended up there?
I miss the activism so much, and I miss being in the field and organizing. And a friend of mine was in D.C. in that time, having a lunch with me and talking about a new job he got. And he offered me if I'd be able to work with him. And he told me he's the campaign manager for someone called Bernie Sanders. And that time that I had no idea who he was. But I trusted my friend, and he gave me my ideal job of like back again to be an organizer and activist and all of those things. But his condition was to move to Iowa. So I took the job. I moved to Iowa, and for the first time, I knew that America is not all New York, Chicago, LA. No, you guys have a lot of unheard of places in your. It's like you lied to me if you said the job in America. You lied to me. So I experienced how to drive for 6 hours or 3-4 hours in just nothing but cornfields.
Eventually, you would meet your wife.
Yes. For this job, I met my wife.
So there was a positive.
It was I met my Emmy Award winner wife, Emma Wilson, in Iowa. I was looking for volunteers to volunteer for the campaign, and part of my job was reaching out to school students. And a friend of mine was telling me, if you'd like to get a hand off this school, this is the one you should know. And he winked with his eyes and he said, and I know she'll like you. I did not understand what did he mean about this. So we met, and we really did not talk about Bernie at all. I remember that day. I'm sorry. We did not. It was not a professional moment at all. We started talking about everything else.
Everything but Bernie.
We talking about Egypt, about my background, her background, politics, election, revolution, the coup, everything. And we just started talking, and now I understood why my friend told me she'd like you. And before we left, I just was like, wanna have coffee with me? And she never volunteered for Bernie Sanders after that.
So eventually you came to Connecticut. You've been here for about a year and a half.
Yes.
But let's talk about Egypt today, because of all of the effort and time that you put into working towards change in your native country. Things didn't get better after you left. They actually got worse. Morsi being taken out of power, as you mentioned, by this coup led by Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. He is now still the president of Egypt, increasingly autocratic. Are you discouraged by what you see continuing in your native country?
After President Sisi led a coup against the president, he said, "I'm not running for president." Of course, no one believed him. And you can see now we're going back again to the same environment, the same atmosphere that we've experienced before the revolution, before 2012, under Mubarak, and even before that. We have zero freedoms anymore. Again, no freedom of speech, no freedom of media. All of the newspaper, if they will mention anything that does not fit the state policy, they would be locked, and we have a lot of blocked websites. In Egypt, we have more than 60,000 people, 60,000 people in prison, with no trial, with no charges, with nothing, but for political reasons, who support the president Mohammed Morsi, or any other reasons. And even now, the crackdown against the revolution power is still till today. People who do not belong to the Muslim Brotherhood or any other force, but they do believe in the revolution, and they do believe in free election, and they believe in human rights. They also in prison till yesterday. People were arrested for that reason.
So what do you think the future holds for Egypt? You believe in democracy. Can that happen again?
It can. Of course it can. The future in Egypt, actually, as I see it, is two parts. The first part is the near future, and that I do believe things will go down very, very bad, and the collapse in our economy and our political environment and atmosphere will hurt a lot of people in Egypt. So this is the near future. We'll see the huge collapse in Egypt, and that will be very bad, not only for Egypt or for the region, but also for Europe and the whole entire world. And this is why I'm always feel sad when I see that the American regime or the American administration will stand in support of a dictator and dictatorship in Egypt or elsewhere, against the American principles, against freedom, human rights, freedom of speech. That bothers me a lot, and that actually hurts the people and does not help the American image. The far future, I do believe we will be able to, we will achieve democracy, because the generation that believes so much in freedom and human rights, I think will take over, and they will now be going back after that.
Esam Boraey again is a Connecticut resident originally from Egypt. Esam, thank you for talking with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchil. Today's show was produced by Carmen Baskov. You can listen to the show anytime by downloading our podcast on your favorite podcast app. Just search Where We Live. As always, thanks for listening.